Well, good afternoon all and welcome to the Vale of Glamorgan Cabinet meeting of the 6th of July 2023. I'm Councillor Liz Burnett and Chair of the meeting as the leader of the Vale of Glamorgan Council and Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources. If I could just remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and that this recording will be archived for future viewing. All participants should mute themselves when not speaking so that we avoid any background noise or feedback. And if any participant wishes to speak, then we should either raise our hands either on screen or using the digital function. The chat function should only be used to highlight any technical issues and or to attract the attention of the chair or Democratic Services Officer. Before we go ahead, I actually would like to just inform Cabinet of the Council's success at the Wales Veterans Awards last night, where we won a bronze award in the Employer of the Year category. So huge thanks to our Armed Forces Liaison Officer, Abby, who has done a superb job on that. But also our congratulations should go to Barry veterans John Edwards and Jeff Rees, who were finalists in the Volunteer of the Year award, with John being given a bronze award as well in that category. So huge congratulations to them. Today we're going to be discussing a range of topics, looking back at the financial outcome for last year and the capital projects and schemes that were successfully delivered, as well as looking forward to how we continue to work with Vale communities and also to deliver our services more effectively. So if I call up the relevant report, we can move forward. So agenda item 1 is apologies for absence, and I can see that everyone's here. Eddie at the moment is somewhere on the outskirts of Barry, but is definitely within the meeting, so that's fine. Then agenda item 2, we can move on to minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of June 2023. So if I can take those as a true record of that meeting.
And I'll second those.
Super. And everybody happy with that? No dissent? The agenda item 4 is a reference from Governance and Audit Committee on the 12th of June 2023. And that
Sorry,
is...
Leader. Oh. Can I just check that there were no declarations of interest?
Do you know, I had highlighted that and I completely missed it. And no declarations, and also if there are, the nature of such interests. So do we have any declarations of interest? No. That's right. Thank you. If I'm going to miss anything, it's always that one. So yes, if we go on to to reference to agenda item 4, the reference from Governance and Audit Committee, that's the annual internal audit report 2022-23. And I have to say it's a really interesting committee meeting with some really in-depth discussions. The overall item was, as it says, the annual internal audit report, and there was discussion in general on that, in terms of being discussed about the direction of travel in terms of audits, about whether or not follow-up audits would be undertaken for all limited and no assurance opinions, and that was agreed. But then the main debate of the agenda item was discussion of the no assurance opinion report issued in relation to Stanwell School, and I think that was the bulk of it. Now I know that Councillor Birch, obviously, as Cabinet Member Education, has had more dealings with this area. So I don't know if you would like to comment on this report, Rhiannon?
Yes, I've got quite a few things I'd like to put in here, please. So as Liz has said, the audit team went in March to Stanwell to look at the accounts because the school was unable to meet its financial obligations. This resulted in a no assurance report, which means that immediate action is required to address fundamental gaps, weaknesses, or non-compliance identified. The system of governance, risk management and control is inadequate to effectively manage risks to the achievement of objectives in the area audited, which of course is a matter of great concern. There were strengths identified in the audit. We have to be balanced about this, but these are some of the key issues that were identified. The local authority's financial and contract procedure rules were not adhered to by the school, which is in breach of the fair funding scheme. Apparently, they believed that as a foundation school, they were outside these regulations, but in fact, that is not the case. No formal agreement was in place with the contractor in relation to a capital project they had undertaken, which incurred significant overspend, which had not been identified and had not been reported to the governors or to the audit review, or prior to anyone prior to the audit review. Grants had been included in the budget, which they were not sure of receiving. So that was obviously difficult to point out to them. No evidence was identified of active measures being undertaken as soon as the overspend was identified, and key decisions that were made were not explicit within the minutes to the governors. So Stanwell had been responsible for its own accounts for 30 years, and its status as a foundation school meant that the Vale had no oversight of their procedures and decisions. It's disappointing that proper procedures were ignored around finance, contracts and expenditure, because our concern is that public money is spent properly and is fully accountable. It's also disappointing that major financial decisions were made without proper reference to the Board of Governors, both in making the decisions and reporting them afterwards, which is a basic requirement in the spending of public money. In fact, in talking to the governors, it became clear that they did not know what they didn't know, which is a very difficult situation to be in. And obviously, a lot of what the Audit Commission turned up was a shock and a surprise to them. I'm confident that our finance team now has a proper handle on the accounts and plans have been put in place to address the deficit. I'm also pleased to report that this has not impacted on the education of the children. We now need to make sure that all aspects of the school are satisfactory and staff, students and parents can be confident in all aspects of the school experience. The report from audit produced a series of detailed recommendations for action, which are outlined in the report. Regular updates are to be received by the Government and Audit Committee and obviously will be referred on to Cabinet. As part of the assistance that the Vale Council is offering to Stanwell School, the consultation process will begin on the 11th of September around the return of the school to local authority governance and the resumption, we hope, of the high standards of financial governance we have the right to expect from publicly funded bodies.
Thank you, Rhiannon. I have to say it is a worrying situation, but I think that we would all agree that apart from ensuring that the financial management of the school is what would be expected, and as you said, our finance department are working closely with the school, as we have done actually in things like communications and stuff like that before when the school has faced issues. So on this we are working closely with them, and thanks must go to our finance team for stepping up so quickly and so decisively. It's good to know that there are going to be further reports both in July, week after next, and also in September, where the school will be reported back to the audit committee with further reports. And I think, for us, while there are things that we could recommend, I think it's probably right. We will have further references in relation to this to note the report that's before us today. But also I would like to recommend that we give our commitment to parents and children of that school that we will do everything that we possibly can to ensure that that school is financially sustainable and that the children of that school suffer no detriment going forward. And so for me, it's note that, but also give a commitment from this cabinet towards the children of Stanwell School. So are we happy with those as recommendations? Yeah.
I'll second those.
Thank you. Then going on to Glamorgan Heritage Coast Advisory Group. I used to be a member of this group. I always loved this group, particularly the updates on things that were going on in the Heritage Coast and the biodiversity and whatever. It was actually somewhere else recently and saw some in Ceredigion, saw some choughs, and I said, somebody said that, you know, they're really rare. I said, oh, we've got them all over the place in the Vale of Glamorgan. So I think you learn lots of things from the Glamorgan Heritage Coast Advisory Group. So as usual, there was the update from the site ranger, Mr. Locke, Paul Locke, which is talking about a lot of school visits, because they do an amazing amount of educational things. But the bus prices have actually had an impact on that, as they seem to have in an awful lot of places. Their work on maintenance of meadowland, they've been doing quite a lot on that, and increasing the range of specific rare species. But there was discussion about the poor internet access in the rural Vale. And it's quite interesting to think that, you know, when we've got areas that are very, very well connected in the Vale, rural Vale still actually has an issue with connectivity. And there was an interesting presentation by the tourism team talking about the economic impact of tourism in the Vale, and you know, some people might be surprised to hear that back in 2019, the total value of the tourism industry in the Vale was approximately 275 million. That's dipped. That's gone down by 29% since the pandemic to 209 million. So obviously we'll be looking at what can be done on that. But it was also mentioned in that the Heritage Coast celebrates its 50th anniversary in 2025. So I think that's an opportunity to do some promotion on that, because it is a really special area of the coastline. So no, it's a report very worth having a look at, and in terms of what's going on in a special area of our coast. So if I can just recommend that Cabinet notes that report.
And I'll second that.
Super. And there's no dissent, so that's great. And then we have the a report of the Vale of Glamorgan Local Access Forum. And actually, this chimes really well with the Heritage Coast Advisory Group. Some of the discussions that they had were discussion of solar farm development in the Vale and impact on rights of way. And there was something else that I was looking at here. Is yes, the progress in terms of increasing accessibility, where footpaths have been renewed, and stiles and kissing gates have been installed so that there's a greater level of accessibility. And also the fact that one footpath at Lavernock has been, and also another one at St John's have been brought back a bit inland because of erosion, coastal erosion there. So it's quite a lot of things going on. And also the types of grants that we've been accessing, and also the rights of way improvement plans. So looks to have been, I wasn't present at that one, but it looks to have been quite an in-depth meeting. So I would move that we note that meeting.
And I'll second that.
Super. So moving on to Cabinet reports proper. First one is Cabinet quarterly work programme. This, as I normally say when we get these, is a housekeeping report. Appendix 1 is actually an update on the period April 2023 to June 2023, so April to June this year. And that's basically looking at the reports that have been considered. As you'll see, they were all on time. Links. So if you access this electronically, links to the actual report, and you can see whether or not there were, with scrutiny, consideration, etc. Then if we go on to appendix, if I can just work through to that. The second appendix, that is actually the quarterly work programme for July through to September. Well, because of recess, while we are all still around having meetings, we're not having formal cabinet meetings. So this is the programme in terms of formal cabinet meetings for July and September, in effect. So it's able to, again, to look on there to see the reports that are coming forward, who the cabinet member is, and whether or not they are proposed for scrutiny committee. So it would be whether or not they are referred on from us, or not. And that, again, that's all fairly straightforward. Normally there would be more reports in that because it would cover a full 3 months meetings. So the recommendations on this are fairly straightforward. The first one, that the updates to the Cabinet quarterly work programme for April to June 2023 attached to Appendix 1 be agreed. And 2, that the Cabinet quarterly work programme July to September 2023 attached to Appendix 2 be endorsed. I'd move.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. And everyone's happy. So moving on to agenda item 8, and we have a few finance reports now. This is in effect our opportunity to look back at the previous year, look at how that matched up to our plans, and look at whether or not we ended the year in a surplus or a deficit position, and what our plans would be for that. I think it's fair to say that there have been significant inflationary and demand pressures during the year. So, the need for a lot of our services has gone up, but with inflation, obviously, money doesn't go as far. So there's been significant demand in children's services post-COVID, and also the complexity and frequency of legal proceedings, and also placement costs for children. We've talked before about the issues relating to supplies of HGV drivers, and so there's been additional pay costs associated with those. Leisure contract costs, so fewer people are accessing leisure facilities, and the energy costs have been quite marked. And I think has been on an awful lot of people's minds is pothole and highway patching costs, that the weather over the winter period actually had a larger impact on roads, but the costs of actually putting those issues right has been higher. So we are getting on top of that now. And the school transport costs, both with fuel and the cost of drivers, etc., have been an issue. There was an additional payment in social care to social care providers to assist commissioning and recruitment and retention of providers. in order to look after our most vulnerable. But there were some variable variances in such as additional investment income due to increased bank rate, and our underspend against capital financing budget due to us borrowing from ourselves, our internal borrowing. Some provision was made for additional council tax income of 1.5 million earlier in the year. This wasn't achieved in full because arrears have increased. But this has been offset by underspend elsewhere, including against the council tax reduction scheme. In the main, additional pay costs have been offset by vacant posts and other underspend in service budgets. But I think we have to be mindful that that actually does put additional pressure on staff. So we have to be mindful of managing that. The council's also benefited from a one-off adjustment to social services income, the accounting within social services income, and that's enabled a £2 million transfer into reserves for that service area, which has been very welcome. The year-end revenue position was a break-even position after the net transfers, as advised, from reserves, and that was just over 17 million and 0.029 million. So I think that again we say that's exactly why we have reserves. This is for covering eventualities and for planned drawdown where we think that there will be a need within services. There were £787,000 transferred from the council fund, that's within reserves, 953,000 from the housing revenue account, 11.785 million was transferred into specific reserves from revenue, and 15.554 million transferred from specific reserves to provide one-off funding for projects. On top of that, 12.307 million drawdown from reserves to fund the capital programme and for displacement required by capital grants. So these are all ways in which the reserves have been used during this year. The council fund now stands at 11.523 million as at the 31st of March 2023. Housing revenue account had a smaller than projected drawdown on the ring-fenced reserve of 953,000, to reducing the level of its ring-fenced reserve to 16.486 million. So if after taking account of directorate movements to and from reserves, the revenue outturn actually showed a surplus of 1.890 million, which it's proposed is transferred to reserves so that it can be used in a number of specific areas. So this is not a sort of let's put it in reserves and forget about it. This is put it in reserves as a way of interim saving so that we can then go forward and use it. And the way that we're looking to use that is that there'll be £200,000 transferred to the Education Pressures and Improvements Reserve, and that's specifically to provide additional support to schools in special measures, because we know that we're committed to supporting those schools to improve as quickly as possible, and that will take some additional support. So the 200,000 for that. £850,000 to the Education Pressures and Improvements Reserve to support additional learning needs in mainstream schools. We know that our schools are under huge pressures. Our children many have additional and more complex needs, and so our schools need to be supported to provide support in turn to those children. £20,000 will go to the Neighbourhood Services Reserve for repairs in single-use sports facilities. £350,000 to go to Neighbourhood Services Reserve, specifically for micro asphalt schemes to address the condition of roads within the council area. So for those people who've had them those schemes in their areas. It's for roads that don't need full resurfacing, but actually it's a very effective way of dealing with the potholes and then resurfacing over with micro asphalt. It's actually faster and more cost effective than a full resurfacing. So we'll be doing more roads in that way. £150,000 to Neighbourhood Services Reserve to support delivery of health and safety works in leisure centres. 200,000 to Reshaping Risk and Investment Reserve to provide additional support to children and young people. And again, that there are some young people who need additional support, whether that be, there won't be any funds for summer activities, etc. from Welsh Government this year. It might be that we do more of that, or that there are specific projects, programmes that we need to provide, and there are ideas which will be brought forward on those. And then finally, that £120,000 to Neighbourhood Services Reserve to support the implementation of the A48 scheme to improve road safety. So this report is going to Corporate Performance and Scrutiny Committee for discussion. So I'm sure that we'll be going into this in more depth there. But before I go to the, I can just find it. Right, before I go to the recommendations, I need to go to the legal section of the report and correct a typo where there is, just trying to find it now. Come back from the appendices and I should be able to find it. Where in effect, the in the legal section, it makes note of the 2021 accounts, and that this actually should refer to the 2022-23 accounts. So if we can just make sure that typo is corrected. So the recommendations, which are on page 4, that are before us, is that the report and the financial measures taken and proposed be approved. That the allocation of overall council surplus as set out below be approved, and that, as laid out, was the £200,000 to Education Pressure Improvement Reserve, £850,000 to Education Pressures and Improvement Reserves for ALN support, £20,000 to Neighbourhood Services for repairs to single-use sports facilities, £350,000 to Neighbourhood Services Reserve for micro asphalt schemes, £150,000 to Neighbourhood Services Reserve for health and safety works in leisure centres, £200,000 to Reshaping Risk and Investment Reserve to provide additional support to children and young people, and £120,000 to Neighbourhood Services Reserve to support the implementation of the A48 scheme to improve road safety. And finally, that the report is referred to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee for their consideration. And I'd move.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Great. We all happy with that? Super. Then moving forward on to agenda item 9, and that is the capital closure of accounts. Right. And this in effect details the funding that is set out by Directorate, and it details the funding sources used to fund the programme. There were several schemes to totaling about 2.019 million were required to be added late into the programme, and the report notes the current adjusted programme of 82.468 million and capital expenditure during the year of 80.791, which, when you actually think about the continued challenges faced due to a number of issues, which would, include significant cost increases and shortage of resources. I think most of us have sort of seen people try and order something and it's, well, not sure if it's going to come in today or in 3 months' time, maybe even longer. So to actually deliver 98% of the programme is actually quite a phenomenal performance by the relevant teams. So due to, as I said, due to the commitment and hard work across all directorates, the current adjusted programme of 82.468 million, a net slippage of 715,000 was slipped into the 2023 capital programme. And I think there's been a very close watch kept on the capital programme this year. The summary position of all change in the capital programme by directorate for approval at council on March the 7th of 2022 to 31st of March 2023 is set out in Appendix 2, and that was a new chart that was introduced to help us to keep a track on how things were changing. Makes interesting reading. And a breakdown of the funding of the capital programme is provided within the body of the report, and I can see numerous hands up, and I'm sure that various cabinet members will want to comment on their own. Further funding streams were used, including a total using total of over 46 million in the form of Welsh Government grant, other grant income and Section 106, and additionally 23.284 million has been drawn down from reserves or funded through revenue contribution to capital. The capital receipt balances at the 31st of March 2023 was actually just over 10.5 million, and a breakdown is also provided within the report. I think it's as I said, it is important to recognise the work undertaken to deliver the capital programme. Not all are sort of big shiny schemes, and I think we could go on to mention the phenomenal impact of the continued school building programme, but also there's a lot of work going on to maintain, renovate, and update existing council properties, and they're also detailed in the report. And under the housing improvement plan on the 7th of October, the council completed 23 new homes for social rent at Lonavell in Wint off Hayes Road. And the council's Homes for You waiting list of the council's Homes for You waiting list have moved in. In fact, I'm hoping shortly to go and visit 2 more schemes that are either nearing completion or nearing occupation. So that's actually a great move forward. So those are all delivered. Before I go on to the recommendations, Mark, did you want to come in?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Lida. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to concur with your views about the team behind all these capital projects. They work exceedingly very hard, and also they work with a lot of contractors that we deal with. And, they do a fantastic job under very difficult circumstances. So I like to associate myself with those comments that you made, Lida. But the other point I would also like to point out, and I'd like to thank my directorate in particular, is on the successful delivery of the resource recovery facility, which is on page 7 of the report. And that's an amazing facility. And I had the privilege not just to visit it in the final part of it, but also at the beginning and the middle of the project. And I was absolutely delighted seeing it in working, and I know the leader was as well. And I know many of us took some videos of it in action, and you really see that all the residents' hard work in separating and recycling really doesn't go to waste, I would say. It really is reused and then hopefully transformed into products that we use. So it's really something that, you know, I'm very proud of the team for doing this, and I know that many councils are very envious of us and are keen to visit our facilities, and you know, and I'm sure that this is a way forward for us to try and counteract climate change. So, you know, I like to, you know, really highlight that. I mean, to me, that has been the best aspect of being a cabinet member this last year, was seeing that facility in operation and to seeing it delivered. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, no, I think we were both complete anoraks that day, weren't we? Wandering around the waste, no, the resource recovery facility is the posh title, isn't it? But no, it's a superb facility. Gwyn, you've got your hand up.
Yes, just to add to your comments, Leader. The development at Hayes Road was extremely good news, and that brought in 19 houses, 2-bedroom houses, and 5 3-bedroom houses for residents to move into in October 2022. And this was the council's first package deal contract, completed successfully by a development partner using local subcontractors and suppliers, many based on the adjacent trading estate. A scheme was constructed using modern methods of construction, utilizes a structurally insulated timber panelized system with all windows also pre-installed. There are a number of schemes in the pipeline which are moving forward, but in Appendix 1, you will see all these listed and the work that we've done over the last year. But I would emphasize one item is listed there, and that's the 2.5 million we spent on the energy efficiency of the homes, which has made a great big difference to those people living in homes across the Vale. Thank you.
Thanks, Gwyn. And yeah, I mean, in terms of energy efficiency, the other thing is, if you look at the resources section on page 9, it's talking about the installation of 206 automatic meter readers. And it sounds daft, but that actually gives us advance warning if there are any water leaks on our estate. So, you know, one is the damage that could be done with a water leak, but the other side of it is we don't want to be paying for water that we're not using or wasting water for that effect. And I jotted myself some notes down. If you look at paragraph 2.12 on page 6, and it's talking about the progress that's been made, and in terms of 6 schools and a Welsh medium nursery within the Band B programme of Sustainable Communities for Learning, and talking about the Llantwit Major Welsh medium nursery, which I attended to the opening. St David's Church in Wales Primary School, South Point Primary School, Ysgol St Barrack more recently, Whitmore High School, Ysgol Gymraeg Bro Morgannwg and Pencoitra High School. But then you have to add on to that, coming in September, Derry Newydd, Cowbridge Primary, next April, St Nicholas Primary. Then we're just about to start the Ysgol Derry 2 expansion. We're working now on Iolo Morgannwg, Welsh Medium Primary in Cowbridge, and then hopefully soon we'll see more details about the replacement school for St Richard Gwyn. So a really ambitious programme, and hopefully more information about housing as well in the future. So the recommendations that we've got for this report are that Cabinet note the year-end capital position for financial year 2022-23, that Cabinet approve the additional scheme budgets as set out in Appendix 1. 3, that Cabinet note the summary position of the changes in the capital programme by directorate from approval at Council on 7th of March 2022 to 31st of March 2023 are set out in Appendix 2. 4, that Cabinet note the emergency power approved in respect of the slippage is set out in Appendix 3. And then finally, that the report is referred to Corporate Performance and Scrutiny and Resources Scrutiny Committee for consideration. And I'll look forward to the conversations at that. So I'd move.
And I'll second that, Leader.
Thank you. And thank you all for your continued commitment on that to play your part in the monitoring of delivery of all those schemes. So the next report is the annual Treasury Management report, and I mean, as a Cabinet would be aware that we're required by regulations under the Local Government Act to produce an annual Treasury Management review of activities and actual prudential and Treasury indicators for 2022-23. And the report meets the requirements of both the SIPFA Code of Practice on Treasury Management, that's the code, and the SIPFA Prudential Code for Capital Finance in Local Authorities, that's the Prudential Code. And the Welsh Government revised guide on local government investments, which was April 2010. So we undertake capital expenditure on long-term assets. These activities may either be financed immediately through capital revenue resources, and that could be capital receipts, or maybe it gives rise to borrowing need termed as capital financing requirement. And then, in terms of our Treasury management strategy in relation to borrowing during the 2022-23 financial year, the council maintained an under borrowed position. So that's basically that we didn't borrow all that we might have needed to deliver our capital programme, because the cash supporting the council's reserves, balances and cash flow were actually used as an interim measure. And it's quite an interesting thing at the moment. I mean, we can look at the sort of national press and the issues of public sector organisations taking on loan finance or public debt. And it's a tricky position at the moment with interest rates as they are. So, we need to be very mindful that we don't borrow when there are high interest rates. So the council's borrowing requirement reduced by just over 2 million in 2022-23, and that gave a total capital financing requirement of about 195.6 million on the 31st of March 2023. The council borrowed 3 million from the Public Works Loan Board to part refinance maturing debt. And the Public Works Loan Board is the main lender to local government, and that accounts for about 2/3 of all local authority debt. Our debt portfolio at the 31st of March this year, with interest payable, detailed further into the report, and that table also shows the movement of the portfolio from March 2022 to March 2023. The total external debt was 148.482 million as of 31st of March this year. In terms of investment, interest rates were, as I've just said, were very volatile and on an upward trend throughout the 2022-23 year, as the Bank of England made attempts to combat the inflationary pressures in the economy. But said that continues to be very volatile. Appendix 1 provides details of the movement in interest rate forecasts quarterly throughout the year. And the upward movement in interest rates meant that the council was faced with the challenge of proactive investment of surplus cash for the first time in over a decade. I suppose this emphasised the need for a detailed working knowledge of cash flow projections so that the appropriate bands could be struck between maintaining cash for liquidity purposes and laddering, so sort of stacking up deposits on a rolling basis to lock in the increase in investment rates. With the UK economy experiencing a rising interest rate environment, investment returns have increased significantly during 2022-23. Hang on. I think we've got some interference. That's all right, we're okay. So the council's investment portfolio as of 31st of March this year, with interest rates receivable, are detailed further on in the report, and the table also shows the movement of the portfolio from March 2022 to March 2023. The total investment portfolio as at the 31st of March 2023 was 93.920 million. The other thing that we have to cover as part of this report is prudential indicators, and details of statutory, prudential and treasury indicators are detailed in this report within sort of section 2, and that sort of runs through it. All treasury management activity undertaken during the financial year in 2022-23 complied with the limits laid out in the strategy approved at full council on the 7th of March 2022, and that was, if you want to look it up, that was minute number 920. So a comprehensive report, and Appendix A gives all the details. Just finding the recommendation is fairly straightforward, and it's that Cabinet accepts the annual report on Treasury Management 2022-23, and that the report be referred to the Corporate Performance Resources Scrutiny Committee prior to being referred to full council for approval. So this will go to corporate performance scrutiny and then on to full council. And I'd so move.
And I'll second that.
And we're all happy on that. Excellent. And then agenda item 11. This is the Corporate Resources Directorate capacity and ways of working. This is a fairly straightforward report in that after the restructure and the formation of a Corporate Resources Directorate, which went to Cabinet quite a while ago now, the sort of organisational arrangements as were laid out in paragraph 2.5 meant that we've actually been working without a head of policy and business transformation, or without an operational manager for performance and policy, which, when you consider the amount of forward-looking and innovative schemes that we've been trying to put in place, and all the work that's been going on in terms of cost of living crisis, etc., has put a lot of pressure on that department. As a result, if you have a look at paragraph 2.6, what that's meant with those vacancies in reality is a completely flat reporting structure, which in terms of effective management and effective service delivery is not workable. So moving on to paragraph 2.8, there is the recommendation is that it moves to a reorganisation of directorate around 4 key service areas which are laid out: so finance, human resources and organisational development, digital and legal and demographic services. And those 4 service areas will have 2 new strategic advisory group. I mean, that's the people within them will work in a cross-cutting way in terms of corporate strategy and insight and participation, communication within the team. Because if you look back at the corporate plan, what we are trying to achieve is become a more fleet of foot organisation, which is more engaged with our communities. And so this is the team that is actually tasked with delivering that. I think it's worth noting, if you look at the resources and legal considerations, there are no cost implications. In fact, it is hoped that this will actually deliver savings, but there are no cost implications on this at all. So it's a very straightforward one, but we felt it important to bring this this report to Cabinet so that people were fully aware of the proposed direction. Ruba, I can see your hand up. Do you want to come in before or after I give the recommendations?
You can give the recommendations, and I just wanted to make a comment really
That's
and
great.
second it for you. So
well, that's why I thought I'd do the recommendations first, if you want second. So that, yes, the recommendations before us are: firstly, it's recommended that Cabinet note the contents of this report, and secondly, that it's recommended that Cabinet endorse the proposals contained in this report. So I'm happy to move.
And I'm really happy to second that, Liz. I think the important thing about from my perspective about this report is that it acknowledges the real importance of our participation, engagement and equalities strategy. And you know, there is no cost implication for this reorganisation, but you know, we have a really good equalities team and you know, participation team and communications team, and it's really putting those together in you know, in one sort of area, sort of a virtual area, I guess, to work together to deliver, you know, our really important participation strategy and equalities, not only across our organisation, but obviously, you know, to our residents within the Vale. So I wholeheartedly support this.
Super. So you've seconded that, and everybody else is happy with it. So that's super. And then my last report for today is the draft digital strategy. And the council previously had a digital strategy from 2017 to 2020. And in 2021, there was actually an assessment undertaken to look at how we develop a new digital strategy. And then I sort of, I think it's fair to say that the world went a bit mad, didn't it? And so the way in which we look at digital innovation is probably a step change away from where we were in those times. So that the changes that we saw in the pandemic, where we all became much more used to accessing services online, and the thinking behind this strategy is how do we use digital technology to become more effective, more active, more accessible, more inclusive, and also more data driven. You know, I think one of our favourite phrases when we're discussing this is, where's the evidence? You know, what is the data around this? What exactly are we talking about? You know, it's always good if we can move away from sort of finger in the air decision making, isn't it? To, you know, that's not the way that we should be working. Well, it's not the way we do work, but it's we need to make sure that we have the data there, and we need to make sure. And I think that whenever you talk about sort of digital technology, there is always a fear that people will be left out. And I think we have to say right at the start, that is absolutely not the case. That is not part of this at all. In some ways, the more people that we can support digitally, and I know, quite often I'm doing personal admin and stuff on a Sunday afternoon. It's really nice to be able to access things digitally there without having to ask people to work. But if people want to pick up a phone, if people want to talk to people in person, people want face-to-face meetings, they can, that still applies. So the draft strategy is based around four themes, and each have two commitments. That's laid out in paragraph 2.7. And the first one, as I said, is community and involvement. So the commitment one is listening to the community to understand their needs in order to transform digital services. So understanding how people either do or would like to access our services, how we can do that better. Commitment two is accessible, inclusive and sustainable digital services for residents. And I think it's fair to say that things are changing quite rapidly, which for many is a bit scary. So we have to make sure that we go at a pace that people find comfortable. Theme two is organisation and processes, and that's making sure that we create and embed reliable processes so that digital projects are delivered successfully, and that we develop a digital culture where digital is seen as a key enabler of all services in the organisation. So that could be staff being able to work in a more agile way, or it could be that our services are more accessible. Theme three is digital people and skills, and that's equipping colleagues with the tools to deliver services effectively for residents. And that's more of an internal thing than an external thing. And supporting and empowering colleagues to develop and use their digital skills. So to make sure that they are fully enabled. And then four is what it's talking about, things being data driven, data and insight, that we would invest in and harness data insights to inform and improve decision making. I know a lot of us, we get monthly reports on different aspects of the business, and it's those insights that are really important. I can remember going to a meeting only recently where I was hearing of somebody that was tracking their carbon impact, and it was incredibly powerful to see how somebody had gone from about 2 tons of CO2 per year carbon impact over to zero, and was actually able to measure that and measure the impact of their actions. And then the final one is I say, it's data and insight, and using clear standards to ensure effective data sharing, so that we all know the background to what we're talking about, and that we can make effective decisions. So that is all laid out in Appendix A. This also is going to be taken or referred over to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, and I'm sure that there will be a very comprehensive discussion of the strategy, the draft strategy, before it comes back to us. So I won't go into it in any more detail at this point, but I'm sure that we'll discuss it in scrutiny and when it comes back. So Ruba, again, did you want to come in now or after recommendations?
Can do it after recommendations.
Right, okay. So we've got 4 recommendations, and firstly, it's recommended that Cabinet note the contents of this report. Secondly, it's recommended that Cabinet endorse the draft digital strategy and proposals contained in this report as the basis for wider consultation. 3, it's recommended that Cabinet refer this report and Appendix 8 to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee as part of the consultation process. And 4, it's recommended that Cabinet receives a further report on the conclusion of the consultation process in order to consider a final digital strategy to be adopted. So I look forward to a full conversation in the corporate performance and resources scrutiny. So over to you, Ruba.
Thanks, Liz. So again, I second this report, and it is really important that we recognise that particularly I think post-COVID, that many more people are using their digital pieces of equipment to access services and information, and that's not to say, as you said, Liz, that we're not going to make sure that we reach everyone, and particularly those who may be older, who don't access these services, although many more older people are accessing digital services. And I thought it'd be quite useful just to know in our May stats, in terms of access to our website, for example, the Vale Glamorgan website, we had 160,000 people had hits on our website, and 40,000 of those were individual devices. So if that's a measure of the number of people using digital services for information, and 95% of residents in the Vale of Glamorgan digitally completed the census survey. So that's also worth bearing in mind in terms of the number of people we will reach by having a strategy which is slicker and more reactive as well, so that we can use the stats and the data to improve our services. And I suppose I just want to reassure people as well that those people that aren't accessing digital services, we're not going to leave you. We're going to make sure that we reach you also. So I'd like to second this report, Leader.
Super. Do you actually that sort of jogged the mind? I mean, there are two things here. One, and Mark's going to suddenly pick up his ears. We have cameras on all our refuse vehicles. We know where they are. We know, we can see what's happening around them. I mean, that's mostly to do with, sort of safety and reversing and those sort of things. But we have those cameras and the footage is recorded. But actually, it's not too far away from engaging technology, so that in some ways, wouldn't it be lovely if you are at home, that you can see that your rubbish lorry is coming down your street and will be with you in about half an hour, and you haven't got to go and put all your rubbish out and it all gets soaking wet and everything the night before. There's that sort of thing. There are thousands of people that we keep safe through telecare in the Vale, where we can not only tell if people push their alarm button, we know if people have had a fall, because it activates the system. That is digital technology. There are all sorts of amazing things that we can do, and we need to understand how those types of facilities will help us to deliver better services to our population going forward. So I probably find it stupidly exciting, but it's hopefully that as we have more discussions on this, we can take it forward. So thank you for that. And so everybody else in agreement? Thank you all. So as I said, we're talking about supporting our community. So agenda item 13 is about the Strong Communities Grant Fund, and it's done amazing things since it was first introduced in 2016, which is excellent. So this is over to the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Sustainable Places for the Strong Communities Grant Fund 2020-2025.
Thank you, Leader. This is the I'm actually delighted to bring this to Cabinet today. And if you look on page 2 there, this is just to give you a little bit of background. We actually established the establishment of the Strong Communities Fund was 2017. And it was about you know, the aim was to sort of streamline about community grant funding, how we manage that. And then sort of moving forward, and in 2020, we approved the new allocation of 837,533, and this is from 5 years then, from 2020 to 2025. And then they also did some minor changes around that, which is to allow that a bit more of an effective and efficient management of the small grants. And then we introduced a simple application process for them for smaller grants up to 3,000. So that's highlighted there in paragraph 1 and 4. So as we've already said, you know, the purpose of this is actually help support community groups, third sector and community councils as well, town and community councils, to apply for revenue and capital funding. And this is all going to be consistent then with our vision of working together for a brighter future, which is part of the corporate plan 2020 to 2025. Now, this year, we got a slight increase in the budget from 162,000 to 179,553 £, because we did have a bit of an underspend in last year's. So the wonderful thing about that is that we've actually been able to carry it forward and into this year's budget. Lots and lots of applications. Really, so we were oversubscribed, as we did expect to be, actually. So on the 8th of June, the Strong Community Evaluation Panel, we met remotely, and then we considered the fourth round of application for grants of over £3,000. And we actually had a total of 21 applications were considered on that. And in Appendix A, that sets out the names of the applicants, and so that's in Appendix A there. So that's actually these are the larger grants actually, which are between 3,001 and 25,000. And then Appendix C lists the 10 applications then that we received for the small ones, and these are the ones up to £3,000. And there's some really interesting reading there on different sort of groups and voluntary groups and organisations who we supported. And I think there's been a bit of a recurring theme this year around energy efficiency. Was a really high priority there, which is totally understandable in relation to the you know, the stresses that they experience there. They're trying to improve their cost effectiveness and energy efficiency of their buildings. So the 10 applications to the small grant programme, they totaled £26,617. Now they have all been approved in full, and as I said, they're listed there in Appendix C. And I think you can have a good look at there. There's a real variety across the Vale there, and you've got things like the Barry Athletic Club, they needed a shipping container, storage of their equipment, to things like kitchen refurbishment to the Millwood Bowling Club, Chatty Cafe venue hire there in Lantwick Major, dance mirrors for Pucker Productions, and then we've got like Vale Plus, which is staff training and student travel cost. Wenville Play Group, they wanted a shed for all their equipment and what they're keeping there, and there are others there as well. So it's really good. It's a real variety, and those are actually then spread across the Vale. So that was all approved in full, which came then, as I said, to a total of £26,617. Now we received a further 17 applications to the main grant programme, and these were the ones that were shortlisted, and they're showing there at Appendix A. And now the total sum of those 17 recommended applications, the main fund, is actually £196,506, which did exceed our budget then by £16,953 and 58. However, we've looked at various other avenues of funding as well, and we're actually able to bring some support in from our regeneration pot of money, if they fitted into that, and also then some SPF funding as well. So that's all ongoing at the moment, and we're actually looking at exploring some of those. And I think if you look at Appendix A, you can see those the applications there. And again, just to give a couple of bits of highlights there, and you can see it all across the Vale. We've got like Carriston Community Sports Hall. They're looking at creating a multifunctional space because they've got this huge hall, but actually it could be a lot more functional. They'd be able to get a lot more use out of it for the community if they can actually got the ability to be able to divide it up and change the configuration. So that's in the Caddock's Corner Development Group. We've got like the Amelia Trust Farm. They're looking at creating an eco barn, which I actually went down to have a look at when I was there on a visit prior to this. So, and it is an incredible space, literally just off the courtyard. Is great. So they were actually looking for 25,000, and we've approved 1,280. So then again, that comes into this alternative funding that we're looking at to try and help support the balance of there. And you've got things like Barry Athletic Club, and they're actually looking to carry out a feasibility study for the whole of their site. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that site, but it's absolutely huge. It's right on the sort of crown of the island there. Really great potential for use of that. There are various groups actually using the athletic club, and actually they're coming together and actually helping to support that. So again, we're looking to see how we can support that then moving forward. And then other just mention of other ones. We got like AP Cymru, which is celebrating that not that one, sorry, the motion control dance, where they're looking then for a tutor about leaping into leadership, and this is about helping support our young people actually to become tutors and mentors themselves within dance. So it's actually keeping that sustainability of that group going, and they're doing some great stuff there at the YMCA. Other ones that are like Roost Community Library, they were looking for some solar panels. Again, that helps with their energy and heating costs there. And again, that's a really much used facility hub right in the centre of the community there. And we've got several other ones. We've got Vale Cricket Club, St Bride's Major Church Hall Committee. Again, this is about replacing that heating and 2 windows. So again, this is around that energy efficiency. So it's really interesting reading, actually, and I think that support that we're given across the length and breadth of the Vale, it is absolutely amazing that we're able to do that. And even those, there were some applications that we did refuse for a variety of reasons, but it's about how we're trying to help sort of support those going forward and maybe refer them on to other organisations or give them some support around applying what they can. So it is about that support as well around that. So I've got just 2 recommendations, which are on page 2. So the first one is that Cabinet approves grant funding, can't speak now, grant funding of up to £152,916.58. And then we also endorse the evaluation panel's recommendations as outlined in Appendix A. And then that Cabinet notes the contents of this report and Appendices B and C. And I so move those recommendations.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I absolutely love this fund. It was brought together years ago. We had a whole load of little tiny disparate pots of money, and with all their different criteria for gaining funding, and a lot of them controlled by different organisations, etc. And so by bringing them all together, and also then if you look in paragraph 2.5, working with all the different types of organisations, all the different sectors within the Vale, the sort of added value in terms of conversation and support that is available to the organisations that apply has proved to be amazingly successful. And also the team, the Creative Communities team that run this, they have developed a high level of expertise, both in helping organisations to put an effective application together, but also during the sort of monitoring of expenditure, process as the projects go on, that they almost coach and mentor those organisations to deliver their projects more effectively. And this really is, when we talk about developing strong communities, this has really worked to help communities to deliver. And if you there are some in there that maybe came to us, right back at the start when they had fledgling ideas, and we were able to support maybe some of their initial research, and then we talk to them, and we might be able to give them a little bit more to help with the project that's come on as a result of that. Really, really super work, and I look forward to seeing the outcomes of these projects. It'll be really good. They normally do case studies, don't they, on the different projects?
They do,
which is brilliant. So yeah, I've got no hesitation in seconding this, and I can see that there are no other hands. There's lots of thumbs up. So yes, that's approved. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And then we're on to agenda item 14. This is the Welsh Language Standards Annual Monitoring Report 2022-23. And this is a report of the Cabinet Member for, I'm just looking at this. There's a typo on this, which I hadn't noticed. This says Executive Leader and Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources. No, it's not. It's the Cabinet Member for Education. So, we'll have to make sure that gets amended, but I will hand over to the Cabinet Member for Education, Arts and the Welsh Language. Over to you, Rhiannon.
Thank you. Right, so the Council in 2015 had a compliance notice by the Welsh Language Commissioner specifying which standards applied to the Council. So we have an action plan as a result of that, and a 5-year promotion strategy as part of the compliance process, as does every other council. So this report is about our progress against the Welsh language standards and our promotional strategy for the Vale of Glamorgan. So it's a comprehensive report. I will not take you all the way through it, or we'll be here at tea time. But there are an awful lot of good examples of what is going on, some of which I'm going to offer you. For example, our website is offered in both Welsh and English. They're looking at the historic website pages in order to make sure that they're also provided in Welsh and English. There's StaffNet on the corporate computers, and StaffNet Plus is available to staff so that they can see all their information on internal news, payslips, job vacancies, policies, etc. That can be used bilingually. You will know, because we all receive it, that the Chief Executive sends all staff a weekly message and roundup news at the end of every week, and this is obviously sent out in both Welsh and English. The communications team sends out their material in both Welsh and English. As far as the public is concerned, the contact centre and the main reception areas, all callers have the option to undertake their inquiries through the medium of Welsh. And in fact, the total number of callers to the contact centre who used this option during 22 to 23 was 1,749, which is an increase from the previous year. Calls in Welsh represent approximately 1% of the total calls made, which is 171,986. So a considerable number. We have not got as many bilingual staff in the contact centre as we previously had, but that retention and recruitment has been difficult. But obviously this is something we're looking into. We're looking at new places to recruit people and the opportunities of sharing staff with other authorities. And this is one of our priorities. We have a new Work Welsh coordinator who began work in September last year. There are Welsh language courses at all levels offered during work time and at no cost to staff. And the classes are held remotely and include ordinary members of the community. There are 59 learners at the moment registered with the Work Welsh coordinator, which is an increase of 9 from last year. So there are courses offered all over the Vale. We have a taster sessions before formal courses begin. Before September 22, 41 learners from the Vale of Glamorgan Council, of which 16 enrolled in Work Welsh courses and progressed to the next level. Some other learners opted to remain within the community in order to continue with their classes. There's a StaffNet page dedicated to Welsh learners and speakers, a hub, and they have events for those employees. We have Welsh awareness training for our elected members. In fact, it was provided to all of us last year as part of our equalities training. There are an awful lot of more here. I've got pages and pages of it, but I think that I'm showing to you that we are taking this very seriously, both for staff and members and for ordinary residents of the Vale of Glamorgan. So it is recommended that Cabinet considers and approves the annual Welsh Monitoring Report for 22-23 and the update on the Welsh Language Promotional Strategy in principle, subject to consideration by Learning and Culture and Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committees. And also it is recommended that the Cabinet refers this report with the appendices to Learning and Culture and Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee for their consideration. If endorsed by the committees, that the report will be published. We happy with those recommendations?
We are. I'm very happy to second. And I think
Excellent.
everybody else has got their thumbs up. So yes, we're fine. Thank you in that.
Thank you.
Hang on. There we are. It's got a bit of interference. So agenda item 15 is the report of the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood and Building Services, it's actually a very topical report and something that a lot of people find quite worrying at the moment. So it's good to have some clarity. So it's over to Mark for the damp and mould policy.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a very topical report, and I think it's very timely as well. So I just will introduce it. Now, first of all, on the executive summary of this report, we obviously do have management arrangements already in place for damp and condensation issues within our council properties. And but this policy that I'm going to introduce today really consolidates that and puts it into a very much a working document that can be used by all stakeholders, including residents and officers and the general public who might be, concerned or interested in damp and condensation issues within their properties. Obviously, there's been considerable interest in this issue because we had a very sad death by a person in Rochdale who clearly suffered from damp not being treated at the time, and obviously it's a very serious concern. So the Ombudsman Office has taken a very strong line on this, and we do not accept lifestyle as necessary as a valid reason for mould and condensation be present in the home. Damp and condensation can lead to obviously serious health problems, anxiety and loss or damage to property. Now, in the main body of the report, there is obviously, I mentioned about, a bit of the background already, but obviously there are many challenges at the moment, as we know, the cost of living crisis. There may be a temptation to seal properties up, and of course that causes issues themselves, because obviously people are very concerned with the high cost of heating, so they seal up their properties, but it also means that properties do not, what we call, breathe. And that causes lots and lots of issues with damp. So we have, as we know, very much many organisations that help us out, including the Citizens Advice Bureau, including our Money Advice Service, who can help residents who clearly may have financial issues. And also we have a great team of officers within the Housing Department and our Neighbourhood Services Department in particular that can help people out if there are issues stemming from the fact that they don't have much money and they wish to seal up their properties. So we want to help people before things get very, very serious. Now, obviously, when we constructed this policy, we very much consulted with the residents, and this policy actually went to what we call the Tenants Board on the 25th of May 2023, and clearly this policy was then adjusted to take into account the views of the people there. And very much in terms of 5 ways of working, this is very much a long-term strategy. This is not something in the short term. And obviously, we want to look after, and I'm sure our residents want to look after our council stock, because after all, they live in them. And obviously, we want to make sure that we can try and minimise the amount of money we spend on those properties. And also, if we do minimise that, we want to make sure that if we do need to go in, we need to make the right levels of intervention earlier on rather than later on, because many things with damp, people don't think it's a problem until it gets too serious. Well, I like to emphasise, if you're not sure, please contact, someone in the housing team will come round, do an inspection and find out what the actual cause of it. So obviously, we do take very much what we consider to be an integrated approach to this. This is not just residents want to say and say, let's do something. We want the residents to work with the housing team to identify problems, trying to mitigate them, reduce them, and hopefully eliminate them. And that is very important. In terms of the actual damp policy, it's extremely comprehensive. And this is found in Appendix A. And basically, it goes through is the different types of damp. Now, lots of people believe that they got damp, and actually it's not. It's what we call perception damp. Okay, and it's very important, that people, if they're not sure, they do contact us rather than say, actually, I think it's this, I think it's that. And of course, some damp is due to structural defects. We understand that, but an awful lot of damp is not. So it's very important, that people understand the different types of damp, and obviously people are aware of things like rising damp, penetrating damp, condensation. And what's also important here in this report is something called the dew point index, which indicates relative humidity. And obviously, relative humidity is a fundamental issue because that often is one of the major causes of damp as well. Now, obviously, in this report, we also ways of dealing with damp, and it's very important that residents do call us if they do think they've got damp issues early on rather than later on. And that's obviously very important that they do that. And in this report, there's also a series of fact sheets on condensation and mold. And there's also how to avoid condensation, which I think is really important. And that's obviously trying to ventilate as you can, trying to lessen the temperature between different rooms, do some drop roofing as well, and heating your room. And what if you find mold as well, what do you do? There's also then a checklist on Appendix 3 for officers to visit to identify where the damp is, what's the cause of the damp, where's it located, and also medical conditions of the people that live in that property as well, because obviously that's an assessment of risk as well. And obviously then as what we call an Appendix 4 damp prioritization assessment. Now, obviously with this policy, this is really something that I really feel that is very much needed. It's a consolidation of our existing practices. So I like to move to the recommendation, and the recommendation is that we've considered the report and approves the damp and mold policy provided by the appendix, as I mentioned. I'd like to so move.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, that is a very interesting report, and I think it should clear up a lot of queries for quite a number of people. So it's good to have that. I'm very happy to second that. And do we have agreement from everyone? That's super.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. And then agenda item 16 is your report as well. I mean, there's been an awful lot of discussion, hasn't there, in the media right across the country to do with the adoption of 20-mile-an-hour default speed limit. So it'd be good actually to have an update on what the position is for the Vale of Glamorgan. So it's back over to you for the proposed traffic regulation order details.
Okay. Thank you very much, Leader. And this report, I'm very pleased to deliver today, and it's good timing because, as you probably realise, that the 20 miles per hour is set to be implemented on the 17th September this year. What I want to emphasise on this report is about what we call exemptions and changes. It is not about what I would say, it's not about that you can consult or discuss things that automatically are moving from 30 to 20. They will automatically be moved, but there are things that will stay at 30 miles per hour. And this is where the public have got an opportunity through the traffic regulation process to look into this and to make their points as to whether they agree or disagree. And obviously the officers will be looking in great detail as to, you know, what's the views of residents and users of those roads as to why they would like it perhaps to go to 20 instead of staying as it is at 30 or even at those speeds. And also, but there is also another part of this, what we call the default position, whereby there will be things that would have stayed at 30, but because they're in the area of 20, they're going to move to 20. So we need to consult on those as well. So it's important to clear that up, because I think many residents will probably feel this is all about everything, and it's not. It's only about those two exceptions. What I also like to say to people out there is, of course, that many roads, the main trunk roads, there will be no change whatsoever. They're what we call out of scope. So cars that are going on 50 on the A road, 60 miles per hour, nothing to do with this at all. I want to reassure some people believe out there that all the roads are going to go to 20 miles per hour. That is simply not the case. But obviously, you know, this is part of the legal process, and it's very much part of Welsh Government legislation. There is now what we call public consultation going on in terms of this, and it's very important that people are aware of this. There are many issues to consider here, and obviously the reason why we want to do this is trying to reduce the number of collisions, and if there are collisions, there's going to be less impact. And I think that is very important point to make. I know that a country not far from us, which I know a lot of people have visited or will be visiting, that is Spain, where actually the data has revealed a substantial decrease in number of deaths and number of serious accidents. And that, to me, is the prime reason for introducing this. The other reason for introducing this 20 miles per hour policy is to encourage people to travel in a more active way. And that means perhaps walking, perhaps getting the bicycle out, perhaps to find other ways they can get around without using a motor car. And I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing for air quality, for example. It also means, of course, that people will have perhaps improve their cardiovascular systems as well. And I think it's good for people's health that they walk around. And in many cases, you think about getting into a car, you know, you have to get yourself prepared, just put your engine on, you have to find an opportunity to get out of your car parking space. By that time you're doing that, you can go to your local shop and walk there. So I think in many, many ways, you know, this policy is trying to encourage people to use alternative forms of transport. And but I would like to say, obviously, it's the public's opportunity to really be consulted on those two positions, as I already outlined. So what I like to do is to go to recommendations. The first one, that the Cabinet note the public consultation, proposed traffic regulation orders, social exceptions for 20 miles per hour decibel limit, and proposed annual limits commenced on the 22nd of June. We're going through that consultation now. As I said, that this report is referred to the Environment Regeneration Scrutiny Committee for their consideration, and that the Cabinet is provided a further report on this matter, consider the responses and comments received during the public consultation period, and make a final decision on the implementation of the proposed traffic road orders. So I'd like to so move. I think Councillor John was coming. Councillor John, you seem to be muted.
it's important, Leader, that people out there don't just moan and groan about it. They need to answer the consultation. They need to express their views. That's the most important thing. This is the opportunity for people to come back and express their views. And then a decision will be made later. But certainly, this is a Welsh Government legislation, and it is important that many built-up areas are controlled by 20 mile an hour. There are very many town centres that need this restriction because there's a lot of pedestrians on the roads that are at risk. We've all had accidents in various towns in the Vale, and this is an opportunity for this to be hopefully all cleared up for the future. So I emphasise, please express your views if you want to say anything now. Thank you.
And can I thank you very much for your comments, Gwyn? Much appreciated. And are you seconding my report? Thank you very much. Liz, do you want to come in?
Yeah, if I could, Mark. First of all, I echo Gwyn's comments in that there is a consultation, and we were talking earlier about our actions being driven by data. If people have views on these, then they should contribute those views to this. I suppose what I would say is I don't think I've had anybody ever contact me to say, please raise the speed limit outside my house. But I have had an awful lot of people who've contacted me to say, people are driving too fast outside my house. Can I have a speed check? And I looked on Google Maps, and I looked at, say Penarth, where I live, there is, if you take from the Mary Harriers to Cosmeston, which is the extent of the 30 mile an hour limit currently, and if you drive at 30 mile an hour, and that's notwithstanding the traffic lights and the junctions and things like that, it will take you 2.5 minutes longer to travel that 2.5 miles than it would if it was 30 mile an hour. So if you change to 20 mile an hour, it will take you 2.5 minutes. And I suppose the question for me, I was listening to a presentation the other day, is it worth that 2.5 minutes extra to actually increase the safety of other people on our roads? The road I was talking about, it's got three schools on it, and it doesn't seem a lot to ask, does it, to sort of be a bit slower, have the opportunity to take in the surroundings. Children do daft things sometimes. It gives you that extra time to take avoiding action, and also not to mow down the cyclist that you're passing. But if there are areas where it's going to cause problems, if you think that there are areas, we need to know that through the consultation, because there are, we can make exemptions to particular areas. So no, I think a really good report, and please pass on our thanks to the highways officers who have worked tirelessly on this. And no doubt it's going to come back to us. So I think we will make that a recommendation when we get to the end of the process. But could you, in the interim, pass those on?
I will,
informally?
of course, I will do that. And I know I got a fantastic team. Although it's a very small team, they are very, very efficient, hard-working individuals. And I know how hard that they worked on this for a number of months.
They have. Brill, thank you. So I see, Mark, that you've got a seconder in Gwyn, and everybody seems in agreement, so that's passed. And then the final report for today is actually for Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health, Sir Eddie, and this is related to the Vale Valleys and Cardiff Adoption Collaborative Agreement. So over to you, Eddie. Now you're back.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you. As you said, it's about the collaborative agreement between the Vale, Glamorgan Council, County Council of and City and Cardiff, and Rhondda Cynon Taf and Merthyr. So basically, they're all known as VVCs, and it took me a while to get that acronym understood, but there we are. That's me, isn't it? So the collaboration, it was established in June 2015, and there has been indeed a variation in 2019, but that's all been agreed. And this present collaborative agreement finishes on Thursday, 31st of May, so we really need to get on with this. So the substantive terms of the agreement remain unchanged, but there are some changes that reflect in the governance structure, the operation, the objectives of the service, but they're mainly procedural and centre around membership of the Joint Committee and the Management Board, and also courtesy and rotation of chairs of both structures. In terms of the Joint Committee, it was proposed that the chair should rotate on a biannual basis, and this should be attended by the Chair and Management Board alongside the heads of service. The courtesy of the meeting should comprise of members' representatives, or a nominated member acting as a deputy at the meetings, and these will be held in May and December to fit in with closure of accounts and budget setting. In terms of the Management Board, it's proposed that the Director of Social Services acting as chair should also rotate on a biannual basis. The course of the Management Board remains unchanged, although it is proposed that the membership is amended to include a representative from the voluntary sector and bring it in line with regulatory requirements. The requirement of the Management Board is to meet with Directors of Social Services as agreed in the deed of variation has been removed, as internal mechanisms to report on the performance of the collaborative are in place. Membership in the terms of reference to the operation group have been inserted to reflect current practice, and you can see from the original collaborative agreement contained information about staff transfer under TUPE and details of budget in 2015, and it's proposed that these are removed. Financial protocol has been updated to allow for twice yearly billing of partner contributions to bring it in line with the current process. The potential term of the agreement is 5 years, comprising of an initial term of 3 years and an option to extend for up to 2 years, with reviews incorporated on the second anniversary, and should the option to extend be exercised, 4th anniversary of the commencement date. The agreement requires service to undertake an annual review of the service provision, and these are presented to the Joint Committee. There's also proposed that the timescales for completion of the review should be extended to within 6 months of the end of the financial year, and this extension would incorporate the regulatory requirements, and often it's quite a challenge to be able to meet that, and therefore that's why it's extended for the 6 months. And this will report on the quality of the care on a 6-month basis and bring it in line with the annual reporting cycle to partner scrutiny committees. All the proposed changes have been discussed and agreed by the VVC Management Board and Joint Committee. You'll note in the report that the Vale is a host authority, and all staff within the service are employed by the Vale Glamorgan Council and are based in Dock Office, Barry. You'll also note that the service is responsible for reporting against a set of nationally agreed performance measures to the National Adoption Service on a quarterly and annual basis. The Joint Committee meets twice a year, and the Management Board and Operating Group meets quarterly under the terms of the present agreement, and the Regional Adoption Manager reports to the Joint Committee, the Management Board, on the progress of the performance of the service. When you look at the actual agreement, you can see it's quite a lengthy document. I'm thankful that experts, particularly legal teams, have had a look at that, and therefore it made some sense to me when I've asked the questions on it. So I'd like to go to the recommendations, and the Cabinet agrees to enter into a new collaborative agreement between the Vale Glamorgan Council, the County of the City and County of Cardiff, Rhondda Cynon Taf County Borough Council, and Merthyr Tydford County Borough Council, as attached to Appendix 1, to commence on 1st June 2023. Second recommendation, the Cabinet delegate authority to the Monitor Officer, Head of Legal and Democratic Services, to agree and execute the collaborative agreement and future variations to the agreement. I so move.
Super, thanks, Eddie, and happy to second that. Everyone in agreement? So yes, that's super. So that's agreed. So I don't have any items which are urgent and agenda item 18. Neither do I have any part 2 items. So it just remains for me to thank you for your attendance and attention this afternoon. And I shall look forward to catching up with you all soon. Take care. Thanks.